Hello, Python coders. Well, it is a extremely cold Friday night. It's getting very close to Christmas time. And I thought that based on a conversation I had with a friend a little while back, he was asking me, because I'm in the process of building myself a fairly complex application, but he was curious why I had chosen to build a desktop app and not a web-based app. And I thought, this would actually make a pretty good video topic. So since it's kind of later at night, things are winding down, I thought I would put together some slides and we go through this topic together. First, I'll give you a little bit of history about myself. My name is Jason, and I've been a developer now for about 22 years. Most of the time, my development work is on very large multi-user systems. So it's not working on desktop applications all that much. I started learning Python a little over 3 years ago due to necessity at the company that I was working at. I found Python to be fairly easy to learn, and for what I was doing, a lot of it was top-down development, so procedural development. But I also very quickly found that there are situations where you need to get very heavy into the object-oriented side. After I started working with Python, I got a little curious to see if there were GUI frameworks or libraries for creating GUI applications using Python. I wanted to replace a Windows-based application that I had been using since, I want to say 2007, maybe 2008. And the software that I found didn't do everything that I wanted it to, but it was simple to use. And as things often go, fairly soon after I found the software, the company went out of business. They went defunct. They were actually based out of Canada. I have looked around over the years to see if I could find a suitable replacement for this, but I never found anything that really matched what I was looking for. I found things that were close. I found things that were overcomplicated for what I wanted to do. I couldn't find something that matched the simplicity that I had already found in what I was already using. The one thing that was bad about what I was already using was it had a very limited reporting function. And I thought if I'm going to build a brand new application, I'm going to take and put in a great deal. I'm going to expand the reporting section of the application quite a bit. I have literally been looking at replacing this application pretty much ever since I got it. I've looked at various technologies over the years for doing a web, or not a web-based app, but a desktop app. And finally, I was able to settle on first PyQt, and now I've been working with PySide. So I did look at some other GUI frameworks for Python, which we'll go through here, but landed up settling with now PySide. So, like I was saying, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was kind of poking me a little bit, saying, well, why aren't you building a web-based app? And it seems like even in 2022, and we're getting very late in 2022, it seems like this battle between web-based apps and desktop applications is still going very, very strong. I read a bunch of articles in the last several days before I did this video where people were talking about the pros and cons of a web-based app versus a desktop application. And like many, many things, there are pros and cons to both. They both have their strengths, they both have their weaknesses. I'm really not a huge believer in there is a one size fits all model that's going to work for everyone when it comes to an application. There are some people, and you will find them on Reddit, YouTube, Stack Overflow, that will say, well, do everything in one type of technology, whether that's a web app or a desktop app. Believe it or not, there are people out there who are vehemently anti web-based application. I'm not in that camp, but I do think that when you're looking at which should you build, personally, I think one of the biggest things is your target audience. In other words, who are you building this application for? So that's one of the biggest questions that you really have to ask yourself is, yeah, I'm building this app, but who am I actually building this app for? Web-based applications these days seem to be all the rage. You can't walk down the information technology pathway without bumping into a bunch of web applications and individuals that think that everything should be ran inside the web. A web-based application is one that runs inside of a web browser. In other words, it runs inside Chrome, Firefox, Opera, Edge, all the famous web browsers. Can be hosted in the cloud, also known as someone else's computer, not your own. I personally, when it comes to information technology buzzwords, I would probably say cloud is my least favorite. I was once asked by someone, and they were being completely honest. They were sincere in this question about, do they have data centers like, or a computer, where are they host? Are they up in the sky? Are they in space and they use satellites? I mean, why do they call it the cloud? And I did kind of chuckle, but when you hear the cloud, the cloud, the cloud's up in the cloud, I could see where somebody who's not well versed with technology and isn't an insider in the know would kind of wonder. I've often wondered myself. All it is it's hosted somewhere in a data center somewhere else. Another quick funny story was I started working for, this is many years ago now, a company that in a couple of places they were extremely modern. In most areas they were not. And they decided to hire a new applications director. She was going to manage nothing but applications, where the current director was going to be transitioning to hardware support and special projects. He was also well past retirement age. Um, so they brought an individual in, and the first thing that she started screaming was the word cloud. Well, this needs to be in the cloud. We need to be running all of this in the cloud, in the cloud, in the cloud, in the cloud. And it reminded me of an old saying that I heard many years ago, which is, before you tear down a fence, you should probably find out why the fence is there to begin with. And in a lot of business and corporate environments, before you go in and criticize everything that's there, perhaps you should kind of get the lay of the land and understand why things are the way that they are. Company management entertained her idea and they asked her to pick an application or an area that she wanted to modernize. The one she picked was not a bad one, but the way she went about it, she went out to a company that provides that service. Everything would be in the cloud, going over the internet. And when she did her presentation, the owner laughed when he got the price tag. Yeah, it didn't happen, which all of us knew it was not going to happen, but she didn't last very long. Anyway, so your application can be hosted in the cloud, somebody else's computer, or you can, of course, host it on site. If you're at home and you're building your own app, obviously you can host it right at home. Web applications do have one big advantage, which is you can deploy in one location, which is on the web server, and you can run it anywhere. Obviously, you have to have a network or internet connection, but you can pretty much run them anywhere. This is great in a corporate environment, as you'll see in my last bullet point, because 500 people, the only thing that those 500 people have to have on their computer is a web browser. They don't have to have a specific piece of handwritten application. Just run everything in the web browser. This does tend to have a little bit of a steeper learning curve. And with any types of things when it comes to learning curve, this is one of those things where it just depends. If you already know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Node.js, any of those types of technologies, if you're already working with them, well, then maybe you don't have a learning curve at all. Excuse me. However, if you are a heads down coder and you're working with C, C++, Python, there's a myriad of other things you could be working with. If you haven't worked on any web-based technology at all, then you're going to have a little bit of a learning curve. It comes with a learning curve. It's not always easy to master or embrace. These types of applications may not necessarily be practical for home use. In my particular case scenario, I would have to set up a web server, which I could do. Done that in the past. It's not that hard. I could set up myself a database box, which I already have. I could create another one if I wanted to. And then I could go through the process of writing and deploying application onto a web server. But if you want to distribute this type of application later on in the future, this might not be very practical because then you're asking your customer to be able to install a web server, database box. You'll have a lot of setup ahead of time. Whereas in my case, I could include the SQLite database inside of my application and be just fine. But again, like I said, target audience tends to play very heavily in what type of technology are you going to choose. Maybe you're writing an application for a multi-user environment, and in that particular case, maybe a web-based application is best. It does have the great distinction of updates are fairly easy to handle. You update the application in one spot, and everybody's got a new copy. Desktop applications. Yes, they are still relevant in 2022 and beyond. There are many types of desktop applications that people use on a daily basis. Office products, accounting products, media players, video editors, things like Wireshark for doing network analysis. It's kind of ironic, but when you stop and think about it, the web browser is a desktop application. So it does have to be installed on your customer or end user's computer. The downside to a desktop application is that it does require deployment to an end user's computer or computers. Now, in today's corporate environments, that's not as bad as it used to be. When I first started out a long time ago, deploying applications to an end user's computer was a real pain. There were things that came around like Novell's ZenWorks, which would allow an end user to double click on an icon and it would actually pull the application down to the customer's computer and then they would run it from there. I did experiment with this quite a bit. It worked really particularly fairly well. It was part of their ZenWorks suite. But in today's corporate environments, there are ways to push applications and handle updates automatically. There can be a lesser learning curve, but that is in some situations. And I know I misspelled. I did not say in, I said is. Oh well. So if you happen to know C++, or if you happen to know Python, or if you happen to know .NET, any of those types of technologies, even Delphi, let's say you're a Delphi developer, maybe you really don't want to go down the road of learning all the web-based technologies. Okay, so the desktop application might make sense. In many cases, you will get better performance than a web application. Now, before somebody jumps all over me, I actually got this bullet point from Microsoft themselves. It was in an article that they wrote about why would you do a desktop application, and performance was one of the things that they cited. Now, this was Microsoft, so not necessarily me, but I can see where if you're doing heavy number crunching, heavy amounts of calculations, I could see where the native access to the personal computer would produce better performance. In many cases, a desktop application can be used without an active internet or network connection. Now, again, this is sometimes. If your desktop application is completely self-contained and doesn't need external resources to function, like a database server, then yes, you can work completely and totally offline. I've even seen applications written that will handle not having a database connection. They will bank up their transactions and then push them to a database server. So those are designed to work offline if you suddenly don't have an internet or a network connection. Application updates sometimes can be difficult, but again, this is getting better, especially in corporate environments. And also, if you think about it, if you're running Linux and you're using a packaging service like Flatpak or Snap, I'm not a big fan of Snaps, I usually use Flatpaks. But if you're using a Flatpak service and you update your application in FlatHub and the person, the end user, is doing software updates, then they'll automatically pull in the latest updates. Even Microsoft now has the Microsoft Store, and you're able to run automatic updates for your applications right from there. This is a great, I mean, they're finally catching up with what Linux has been doing for a long time with Linux's repositories and also things like Snap and Flatpak. So again, how are you going to choose? Well, I hate to say it over and over and over again, but it does depend. Who's your target audience? Is it going to be a home user? Is it going to be a corporate business user? And just because it is a corporate business user doesn't necessarily mean that you want to give them a web-based application. Maybe your accounting department has a web-based application for handling all their accounting functions, but you have an auditing team that's 3 people that are going to be doing heavy data and calculations, and they need a desktop application. Now, that's only 3 people. So handling updates for that application really shouldn't be that hard, especially when you can push updates out to people's computers. So again, target audience. Is security a big factor? If you're a home user and you have to connect to an external website to use your application, you're going to have all that data going out over the internet. And yes, I know we do have encryption, but cyber attacks are a thing. So does that matter to you? We've discussed handling updates. But again, another really big factor is, what do you already know? Do you know C++? Do you know Python? Okay, if that's your strengths, you may choose to just use your existing strength. However, if you're already a web developer and you're already fairly proficient with HTML, JavaScript, CSS, Node.js, whatever, you may say, well, this is what I already know. This application's just for me, so I'm going to build it in what I know. Or you could go down the other route. You could say, well, I've never done a desktop application, so maybe I'll take the learning curve and try to build up my skill set. It's never a bad thing to experiment or build your skill set up. That's never going to cost you. You're always going to benefit from the experience. So I say, if that's what you choose to do, go ahead and do it. I mean, that's kind of what I threw myself into, was learning whole new big giant swaths of technology. Okay, so let's talk about some of the GUI frameworks that are available for Python today. We do have a few different options to choose from. We have tkinter, and this is pronounced tkinter, okay, which is actually bundled with Python. We have wxPython, which is the wrappers around the C++ WX widgets. We have PyQt PySide, and Qt is pronounced cute. It is not Qt. So if you hear that in a tutorial video or something like that, just know that it is actually pronounced cute. And then we have a relative newcomer to the scene, which is completely Python, which is Kiwi. And we'll get into each of these different frameworks. tkinter. tkinter is included with the standard Python library. That's one benefit. You don't have to install anything. However, tkinter is, to be nice, it's kind of outdated. You can make applications look good in tkinter, but quite frankly, it's much easier to do that in other technologies. Out of the box, tkinter kind of looks like 1990s Unix to me. Um, I've never really been a big fan of it. It is somewhat easy to learn, especially if you're already a Python developer, but you're going to find that the widget library can be very lacking, especially when you get yourself into a situation where you think, well, this should be able to do this because every other GUI library can, but then you find out the hoops that you have to jump through. Do I have any personal experience with tkinter? No, I do not. I've never written a line of tkinter code. When I started looking at what GUI framework should I go with, I was told to avoid tkinter because of its dated nature. And yeah, that does seem to be true. Okay, our next candidate is WX Python, and these are wrappers written around WX widgets, which is written in C++. Been around since about 1998. This is going to have more of a learning curve because it is very heavily object-oriented based. So if you're a Python developer and you're really not up to speed on object-oriented programming, you're definitely going to want to get there because WX Python is very heavy in the object-oriented space. There is a third-party tool called WX Form Builder that you can use to build the interface for your application. My personal experience with WX Python was I gave it a serious look before I decided to go with another GUI framework. And one of the things that I didn't like was WX Form Builder. I still have it installed today on my current system here, and I do poke around with it from time to time. I'm just not impressed with it. There's just something about it that just rubs me the wrong way. I don't really care for it. So let's move on to some other frameworks here. All right, PyQt PySide. These are wrappers around Qt, and Qt is written in C++. There are two different flavors of the Python implementation of Qt, and that's PyQt and PySide. PyQt comes from Riverbank Computing, which is a separate company from Qt. PySide, on the other hand, comes from the Qt company themselves. So there's the distinction. And the reason that there are two separate implementation boils down to licensing models. If you want to, you can do some research on the history of that. Again, this does have more of a learning curve because it is heavy, heavy, heavy on object-oriented programming. So again, if you're not up to speed on object-oriented programming in Python, you're definitely going to want to get there before you try and tackle something like PyQt or PySide. To me, one of the biggest strengths of PyQt and PySide is the ability to use Qt Designer to build your interface. I use Qt Designer all the time to build my interfaces. I do not hand code interfaces. That's not that you can't, it's just that I don't. I would prefer to have a tool to lay my interface out. That's what I was used to working with before, and so that's why I like using it when I'm working with PySide. Personal experience, yes, about 3 years working with both PyQt and now PySide. I have switched completely over to PySide. Kiwi. Kiwi is a relative newcomer to the Python GUI space. It is a native Python toolkit, so it's not wrappers around a C++ library. I really can't say too much about the learning curve because I have not played around with Kiwi that much. However, it is object oriented, so there again, if you're not up to speed there, you're going to want to get there. One of my biggest, well, I don't want to say complaint, but one of my biggest annoyances about Kiwi is that there is no designer for Kiwi. There did used to be a project out there that was a tool for designing interfaces in Kiwi, but it's now defunct. It's been deprecated now for a long time. When I was looking at posts online, what I saw people say was, I'll just write the code. Well, that's not for me. I don't want to work that way. I like having a visual tool for my interfaces. It looks amazing though for mobile applications. And I do have some thoughts about adding a mobile application for my main application. And so in the future, I may actually go back and look at Kiwi. Right now, my personal experience was I have looked at some of the basic tutorials of it, but I haven't dug into building a full-blown application in Kiwi at all. Um, Not that I wouldn't in the future. It's just right now it's not on the horizon. So what did I do? Did I choose a web-based or desktop application? Well, I chose a desktop application. I don't know why, but for many years, going all the way back to the early, well, maybe later 2000s, I've wanted to build a desktop application, a big one, not a tiny one like a toy, but one that had some really good, powerful functionality in it. Yes, the web is out there, and I don't have a problem with web-based applications at all, but just for some reason, it has been in my mind to build a desktop application. So that's what I chose to do. And again, a couple of the factors that went into this decision was I wanted it to be completely self-contained. The application is just for me. However, I may distribute it later. So it will be easier to distribute it if it's a desktop application than if it's a web-based application. So what toolkit did I go with then? Well, like I said, I did an investigation in different Python toolkits for GUI apps, desktop apps, and at first I settled on PyQt. I wrote a few very small PyQt applications, and then later on I actually switched over to PySide. I switched over to PySide once PySide 6 came out. Okay, so I don't actually look at PyQt anymore. Would I recommend PySide? Yes, I would. I've been very impressed with the library. It's jam-packed with functionality. How important is object-oriented programming when working with PySide? Well, if you're a Python developer that doesn't work very much with object-oriented development, you're going to pull all the hair out of your head. I would highly recommend that you go out there and take some object-oriented programming tutorials before you try to start working with one of these GUI frameworks, because everything is an object. If you want to add a color to something, you're going to create a color object. If you're going to change a font, you're most likely going to be creating a font object. So I would say that put the time and effort in to understand object-oriented programming before you try getting into this. And this is true with WX Python. If you choose to build an application in WX Python, it's still very heavily object-oriented. Kiwi seems to be, from the bits and pieces I've seen, it's again object-oriented. So you must embrace the object-oriented mentality, whether you like that or not, before you start working with any of these GUI frameworks. So where can I find some good materials on PySide? Okay, if you want to explore PySide or even PyQt, I'm going to put some links in the description of this video where you can actually go out and look at some of the material that I have used over the years. There's two individuals that have been very good resources for me. One is a little bit older now. It'll be several years old. But the other material is going to be fairly recent for PySide 6. So I would definitely check out the description for some of those links. What about YouTube videos? What about tutorial videos? Well, sometimes tutorial videos are fine, but the one thing that you want to do is you want to take those tutorial videos with a grain of salt. I watched a few of them before I picked up some good written material on working with Qt. And I found that later on, I found that some of the information that I was told in those tutorial videos was wrong. Not necessarily wrong in that it doesn't work, but wrong in that it's not a good practice to do something that way. If you look at my channel, I've got 3 different videos out now that are, here seems to be the best way to do this. My biggest complaint has been on the use of the files that are generated by Qt Designer. And I see in tutorial videos, I see this being done incorrectly all the time. And it boils me because doing it correctly is not difficult. And it's not really a philosophical debate on better being subjective. There are definitely some very hard and fast reasons why you should do things a certain way in working with Qt. And that it doesn't matter if it's PySide or PyQt. So just be careful about the tutorials that you find out there. Even Udemy. Udemy does have some great course material out there. But again, I've seen a couple and I've kind of rolled my eyes because some of the information just isn't 100% complete, and it would be very easy for them to make it complete. So anyway, that's my story. So I am currently working on a fairly large desktop application in PySide, and that's why I chose to do it that way, and the reasons I went down that particular road. I hope you found this material informative. If you do have any questions, please leave me a comment. And otherwise, I hope you enjoy the rest of your 2022 or the current year you're in. And again, happy coding.